The desert air rippled with heat. Dust swirled like spirits in mourning across the blood-stained arena floor. All around the Colosseum, thousands of alien spectators roared and laughed, placing bets on a match that, by all logic, had already been decided. They were wrong. K.O. Rigger stood shirtless in the center of the circular battlefield, his back marked with scars earned across 6 star systems. His right leg shook with the weight of old wounds, and dried blood from a shoulder gash clung to his skin. But his eyes burned. They burned for her. On a black throne of petrified bones sat Lord Vranix, flanked by warriors and servants. At his side, a figure stood chained, Illyria, the last princess of the Lissari Dominion. Silver-haired, lavender-skinned, with eyes like twin galaxies, she was no ordinary slave. She had once been royalty, once commanded fleets. Now, she was nothing more than a prize. And today, Vranix had bet her life. If the human wins, the warlord had growled earlier, he gets the slave. But if he dies, which he will, the girl belongs to the Gorlax Syndicate. The Gorlax merchant had licked his lips. I'll break her slowly. Kale had heard every word. And now, he stood weaponless, bruised, surrounded by 3 towering gladiators bred for battle. Dravak's brutes. 7 feet tall. Claws. Exoskeletons. Enhanced by cybernetics and savage pride. One of them stepped forward, raising a plasma axe. You are meat, it growled in broken common. Kale didn't flinch. Illyria's breath caught. She hadn't spoken since the warlord had taken her, but now, something inside her twisted violently. That human, he had no chance. No weapons. No allies. Just raw will. Why was he looking at her? Not like a man at a prize, but like a soldier at someone worth saving. And then the match began. The first Dravax lunged. Kale dodged, barely. The axe skimmed past his ribs, tearing into his side. He screamed in pain, then ducked and drove his elbow into the alien's throat, stunning it for half a second. That half second was enough. He snatched the plasma axe from the alien's clawed hands and whirled, slamming it into the creature's side. Sparks flew. Bones shattered. Blood the color of oil sprayed the arena. The crowd gasped. Vranix stood halfway from his throne. The other 2 Dravaks charged. Kale spun with the blade like it was part of him. Fury and pain merged into precision. He wasn't just fighting. He was defying fate. Illyria couldn't breathe. She wanted to look away. But her heart raced with every blow. The chains on her wrists suddenly felt lighter. She hadn't believed in hope in years. But now she did. Blood soaked the sand as the last of the 3 Dravak's brutes roared and charged, claws extended, dripping with venom. Kale's vision blurred, and the axe in his hand felt heavier with each second. Pain lanced through his side, his breath came shallow, but he held his ground. The brute towered over him, metal plating along its chest and arms catching the sun in harsh glints. It swung down with a roar that made the Colosseum shake. Kale rolled beneath the arc of its swing, letting the blade strike the earth, then sprang upward with a burst of desperate strength, driving the plasma axe into the creature's lower jaw. A sickening crack followed. The brute staggered. But it wasn't dead. Its claw came down like a hammer, smashing across Kale's back. The human flew several feet and crashed hard into the sand. Silence fell. Even the jeering crowd choked on their amusement. Illyria screamed. It was the first sound she had made in weeks, and it pierced through the heat and noise like a blade. Vranix turned his head, startled. Kale groaned, blood pooling at his lips, but his eyes opened. Through the haze of agony, he heard her voice. Her scream had reached him. He pushed up on trembling arms. The brute was coming again, slower now, limping from its wounds, but still deadly. Kale's hand scraped across the sand until he felt something cold, his opponent's fallen dagger. He grabbed it, rolled beneath the beast's reach again, and with a snarl of his own, drove the blade straight into its exposed neck. Purple-black ichor exploded, covering them both. The beast collapsed. The arena was deathly quiet. then chaos. The crowd erupted into shock and disbelief. Bets were lost, reputations ruined. Vranix's face twisted into something inhuman. Rage, disbelief, and fear. Cale stood barely, legs shaking. His chest rose and fell in shudders, blood still dripping from his side. He dropped the weapon. He turned his eyes to the throne. To the victor, Cale said, voice hoarse, goes the prize. Vranix stood but didn't speak. His guards stepped forward. One wrong move, and Cale would be dead. Illyria, without permission, moved. She stepped forward, the chain around her neck dragging behind her like a serpent. Her eyes, once dulled by captivity, were blazing. Let him claim me, she said, her voice clear and cold. Or your empire will rot with your cowardice. Murmurs spread through the crowd. Some of the aliens shifted in discomfort. Others smirked. A few human mercenaries in the audience began to cheer. Vranix raised his hand, stalling the guards. Fine, he said, voice like thunder. The girl is yours, human. But know this, you've made enemies today. Cale didn't answer. He just extended a bloodied hand toward Illyria. She hesitated only a moment, then took it. And for the first time since her world had fallen, she smiled, not because she was free yet, but because someone had dared to fight for her when no one else had. Their war wasn't over. It was just beginning. Cale's hand trembled as it clasped Illyria's, slick with blood, grime, and desperation. Her fingers were cool, but firm. That small contact sent a shiver through both of them. The entire arena, once screaming with bets and roars, fell into a stunned, watchful hush. All eyes were on the human who defied odds, and the alien slave who dared to stand beside him. Vranix's guards stepped forward, but the warlord held up a hand, halting them. Let them leave, he growled, though the menace in his voice cut through the silence like a blade. For now. Illyria didn't flinch under his gaze. Cale, wounded and barely upright, gave a faint nod, then turned toward the heavy gates at the end of the Colosseum. The guards parted reluctantly. No one dared disobey a command from the throne, yet every one of them knew this wasn't the end. It was a delay. They walked slowly, each step a small rebellion. When they passed the threshold and the gate clanged shut behind them, Cale collapsed. Illyria caught him with a strength she hadn't used in years. She lowered him to the ground, her pale silver hair falling around his face. You idiot, she whispered. You should have stayed down. Cale coughed. Couldn't. Wasn't going to leave you here. She pressed her forehead against his, trembling. Why? He opened one swollen eye. Because someone should have stood up for you a long time ago. That was when Illyria kissed him, lightly, briefly. Not romantic. Not yet. Just real. Just honest. Outside the arena tunnels, Vranix seethed. He had been humiliated in front of thousands. He turned to his commander. Send bounty squads. I want him found. And I want her dragged back. But, my lord, the commander stammered. The people saw. They'll think. I don't care what they think. Vranix snarled. He's not a champion. He's an insect that bit a god. Crush him. Bring me her chain. Elsewhere, Illyria and Cale were already aboard a stolen transport. The med drone buzzed over Cale, sealing deep wounds with blue flashes. Illyria watched silently. She had once thought her life would end as nothing more than property. Now, the one creature who fought for her was dying beside her. She whispered, You're not allowed to die now, human. We haven't even begun to fight back. Cale, groggy, murmured, That mean I'm stuck with you? A smile curved her lips. Yes. Behind them, shadows moved across the stars. Hunters were coming. But so was something else. Hope. Real, dangerous, human hope. The ship jolted out of hyperspeed, the fractured stars elongating into dots as Cale's stolen cruiser exited near the edge of the Helva wastes. Uncharted, outlaw territory. The kind of place even Vranix's war bands feared to tread without backup. Illyria stood at the helm, armor scavenged from a dead bounty hunter strapped over her body, Her gaze locked on the coordinates glowing softly on the screen. Kale stirred behind her, wincing as he sat up. "You know where we're going? To someone who owes me a favor," she said. "An old resistance cell, buried deep under the sand. They used to fight for liberation before the council sold them out." Kale blinked. "You were one of them?" "I was their best," Illyria said quietly. "Before Vranix bought me in the last purge." He moved beside her. "Then let's remind them who you are." They landed in a canyon veiled in mist and heat. Metal doors hidden under ancient rock parted for them after Illyria keyed a code known only to the long-forgotten. The resistance cell had dwindled to a few ragtag survivors, old fighters with missing limbs, wide eyes, and questions. "Is that Lady Illyria?" one whispered. "Not a lady anymore," she said. "A soldier again." She introduced Kale as the insane human who challenged Vranix for me. That earned murmurs, disbelief, then laughter. But one old alien, eyes dulled by years of betrayal, stepped forward and said, "If that's true, then you've done what none of us could." Within hours, word spread. Across the subnetworks of the galaxy, whispers began. A human had stood against Vranix. Not with a fleet. Not with allies. Just rage, a sword, and love. It didn't take long for mercenaries, deserters, and old warriors to begin drifting in, hungry for purpose. Not everyone came for the same reason. Some wanted revenge, others profit, but a spark had lit the dry grass of rebellion. Kale stood with Illyria on a bluff above the canyon, watching new arrivals filter in by the hour. "You really think we can win?" he asked her. "We don't need to win," she said. "Just burn everything he thinks is his." Suddenly, sensors howled. Ships, dozens of them, approached fast from orbit. Illyria narrowed her eyes. "He's found us!" Kale cracked his knuckles, ignoring the pain in his mended arm. "Good. I was starting to get bored." Illyria tossed him a plasma sword. "Let's make sure he remembers why humans were never invited to this war in the first place." From the depths of the canyon, the resistance began to rise again. The war had only just begun. The night was alive with war. Crimson bolts arced across the skies as Vranix's dreadships descended like vultures on the resistance outpost. Massive walkers stomped across the canyon ridges, blasting chunks of ancient stone into molten slag. From the control bunker, Illyria shouted orders into a comlink, her once graceful hands now stained with soot and blood. Kale, bare-armed and burning with fury, stood on the front lines. Every breath scorched his lungs. Every pulse of his plasma sword sliced through a memory of pain, through a chain that once held Illyria down. The alien warriors who had once scoffed at the human were now following him into battle like a myth reborn. On the canyon floor, he met a towering enforcer, a brute enhanced by Vranix's biotech. Its tendrils lashed toward him, tipped with venom and rage. Kale caught two midair and drove his blade through its core. The creature gurgled and fell. Behind him, Illyria launched from the rocks with aerial grace, unleashing a thermal lance into a cluster of enemy drones. Her face was unrecognizable, painted in blood, dust, and grim satisfaction. She wasn't just free. She was wrath. Kale reached her side just as more enemy troops surged forward. "Running low," he growled. Illyria didn't hesitate. "Then we bleed them with what's left." But just then, a crackle burst through Kale's calm. "Kale, they breached the northern ridge. Our wounded are exposed. Illyria's younger sister is there." His blood chilled. "She has a sister?" "She was taken too," Illyria said through clenched teeth. "She's barely more than a child." Kale didn't wait for the plan. He ran. Through smoke, fire, and falling rock, he fought like a demon. His blade glowed white-hot. The air blistered around him. The northern ridge was a hell's cape, but in the center of it was a small figure, curled behind a broken vehicle, a plasma rifle too large for her hands clutched tightly to her chest. Kale reached her just as two attackers raised their rifles. He moved faster than he thought possible, absorbing the shots with a stolen shield and cutting both enemies down with a single sweep. The girl looked up with wide, tear-filled eyes. "You're the human," she whispered. He grinned. "No. I'm the idiot who fell for your sister." He picked her up and sprinted for cover. By the time they reached safety, Illyria was waiting, her eyes blazing with a mixture of rage and love. She hugged her sister tight, then turned to Cale and punched his shoulder. "Don't ever do that again," she whispered, voice cracking. "Can't promise," Cale said. "I'm a slow learner." They looked over the canyon together. The tide was turning. Vranix's forces were in retreat. But Cale knew better. "This was just a test," he said. "He's coming. Himself." Illyria's jaw tightened. "Then we end it. Not with escape, but with a message." They stood on a battered rise as the final fire faded. Cale raised Illyria's hand, scarred, strong, free. And the galaxy began to watch. The stars had never looked so close. Or so sharp. Cale stood aboard the command bridge of the reclaimed dreadship Valor's Thorn, now a flagship of the United Rebellion. Behind him, Illyria adjusted the grip on her curved obsidian spear, crafted from the melted chains of her own slavery. The rebellion had unified under a banner not of royalty, but of defiance. A human warrior with nothing left to lose and an alien princess once discarded as broken had become the spark. Now they were the storm. Alarms echoed through the ship. Vranix's command carrier entering system orbit. Cale exhaled slowly. Time to end this. The viewscreen lit up. The enemy vessel, Dominion Eternal, was a fortress the size of a moon, jagged like a wound in space. Its central core pulsed with a sickly crimson light. Illyria narrowed her gaze. "He's aboard. He always watches the kill himself." Cale cracked his knuckles. "Let's give him a show." They launched in a dropship, just the two of them. A suicide mission, maybe? But for Cale and Illyria, it wasn't about survival anymore. It was about meaning. About showing the galaxy that scars could become armor. That love could fuel war, and win it. They breached the Dominion Eternal through a docking vent, slicing their way past necromech sentries and brain-linked elite guards. Every hallway was a cathedral of horror. Illyria led with a dancer's precision, her spear spinning like a starfire cyclone. Cale followed with raw fury, his stolen plasma sword glowing brighter with every heartbeat. Finally, they reached the throne chamber. Vranix waited. His form was monstrous, part machine, part tyrant, all power. But what chilled Cale more was his voice, smooth and empty. "You've come far, little traitor princess. And you..." He turned his crimson gaze to Cale. "The pet. The wounded ape they wagered and forgot." Cale stepped forward. "I'm what you made me. But not who you expected." Vranix laughed. "You can't kill a god." "Good," Illyria said, spinning her spear into ready stance. "We're not praying." The fight exploded. Vranix moved like a shadow, cloaked in energy, striking with impossible speed. But Cale and Illyria had something he'd never known. Each other. Every move flowed in harmony, her feints setting up his strikes, his parries giving her the kill shots. Their rhythm wasn't just tactical, it was intimate. Personal. Beautiful. But Vranix was a monster for a reason. He stabbed Cale through the side with a spike of dark matter. Cale dropped. Illyria screamed, and something inside her shattered. She rose higher, her spear bursting into ultraviolet light, channeling the stolen technology he once used to suppress her. Her voice thundered across the chamber. "No more chains!" She drove the spear into Vranix's core. The tyrant shrieked, disintegrating into a cascade of crimson particles. It was over. Illyria dropped to her knees beside Cale. "Please don't die." "Not now." He smiled weakly. "If I die a hero, yeah?" "No," she whispered. "You live. You live with me." And somehow, he did. A year later, the galaxy looked different. No more thrones. No more auctions. No more slavery. Cale walked with a slight limp, his side still healing. Illyria stood beside him as they addressed the crowd on the ruins of Vranix's citadel. She held his hand as she spoke. We are not what they tried to make us. We are what we choose to become. I was born in chains. But love, your love, made me free. The crowd roared. Kale kissed her gently. You still like your odds, princess? I married a madman. She smirked. I loved my odds. And the stars watched. Two souls, wounded, reckless, in love, rewrote the fate of galaxies. One battle. One bond. One last chain broken.